Single millionaire dad buys an abandoned mansion and finds a poor girl with two twin toddlers hidden in the basement. She says, "We live here." He's shocked by the truth. The house was far too quiet. Elian Drayton stopped at the kitchen door, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He looked at the table where Sophie ate her cereal in silence, stirring the spoon in the milk with automatic motions. 6 years old, and she already seemed to carry the weight of the world on her small shoulders. "It's going to be fine at school today," he said, trying to sound cheerful. Sophie only nodded without raising her eyes from the bowl. 2 years. 2 years since Lena died in the accident, and yet her absence filled every corner of that house. It wasn't just the empty chair at the table or the clothes he could never bring himself to donate. It was the silence, the terrible silence that replaced the laughter, the conversations, the plans. Sophie used to be different. She talked non-stop, made up crazy stories, laughed at anything. She woke up singing, asked questions about everything, hugged Elian when he got home from work. Now, she barely opened her mouth. At school, her teachers said she was polite and quiet, a polite way of saying the girl had shut the world out. And Elian, well, he wasn't doing much better. Work had become his refuge. Numbers, spreadsheets, endless meetings, anything to keep his mind busy and away from memories. His construction company was growing, profits were up, but he felt like he was only pretending to live. "Dad needs to leave earlier today," he said, washing his cup at the sink. "The nanny will pick you up from school." Sophie nodded and kept stirring her cereal. Mornings were always like that. Few words, mechanical gestures, a heavy emptiness between them. Elian remembered how Lena used to turn breakfast into a small party. She made funny pancakes, told terrible jokes, brushed Sophie's hair with love. The kitchen was full of life. Now it felt like a museum. On his way to the office, Elian thought about how much had changed. Before the accident, he used to come home eager to see his family. Lena always had something new to tell him. Sophie would run to show him her newest drawing. The three of them would eat dinner together, watch movies, make plans for the weekend. Now he came home and found a girl who hardly spoke, ate dinner alone, and went to bed way too early. The house was a place he needed to be, not a place he wanted to be. At the office, Marcus, his business partner, was already waiting with a stack of papers. "The shopping mall project is behind schedule," Marcus said bluntly, "and we have 3 clients wanting urgent quotes." Elian nodded and dove into work. That was how it went every day. Problems to solve, decisions to make, fires to put out, and it worked. For a few hours, he could forget that he'd go home later and find Sophie eating silently. But that day was different. Marcus knocked on the office door around 3 in the afternoon, holding a yellow envelope. "This arrived for you. Looks official." Elian opened the envelope without much expectation. Legal documents were routine, but when he saw the contents, he grew interested. It was about a property, a mansion on the outskirts of the city that had been placed in a judicial auction. The price was ridiculously low for the size of the land. "Do you know this place?" he asked Marcus, showing him the photos. "I've heard of it. The Whitmore family house. It's been abandoned for about 15 years. Huge property, interesting architecture." Elian studied the images. It was an imposing mansion with Victorian-style architecture and a vast piece of land. Even in the faded photos, you could see the potential. With renovations, it could become a luxury hotel. The location was perfect, far enough from the city to offer peace, but close enough to attract guests. And the price? The price was too tempting to ignore. "I'm thinking about checking it out," he said. Marcus laughed. "A hotel now? You barely have time to eat lunch properly." "That's exactly why. I need something different, something to pull me out of this routine." That wasn't the whole truth. The truth was more complicated. Elian felt like he was drowning in his own life. Work, home, sad Sophie, then work again. A cycle that led nowhere. Maybe a new, challenging project would help him focus on something beyond the constant pain. Lately, he'd been thinking he needed to do something. Anything. Life couldn't go on like this forever. Sophie deserved more than a dad who was just existing. She deserved someone who was actually living. That night, After Sophie went to bed without saying goodnight, as always, he sat studying the mansion's documents. The property had 12 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a library, a wine cellar, and even a conservatory. The grounds included gardens and a small wooded area. It was the kind of place Lena would have loved to explore. She always talked about buying an old house and restoring it, turning it into something special. Old houses have character, she used to say. They just need someone to care for them again. Elian closed his eyes, recalling the sound of her voice. Maybe this was a way to do something she would approve of. Maybe it was just a desperate attempt to find a purpose. He wasn't sure, but something inside him wanted to try. The next day, he called the auctioneer and made an offer. "Do you want to visit the property first?" the man asked. "No need," Elian replied, surprised by his own decision. "I accept the terms." The transaction was quick. Within a week, he was officially the owner of an abandoned mansion he had never seen in person. Marcus thought he had lost his mind. Buying a house without even visiting? That's not like you, Elian. And it really wasn't. The old Elian would have researched for months, made detailed reports, calculated every possible risk. But the old Elian also didn't wake up every day feeling like he was just surviving. Over the following week, he found himself thinking about the mansion at random moments, in traffic, during meetings, while preparing yet another silent dinner for Sophie. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, he had something concrete to lean on. A project, a goal, something beyond the routine that was consuming him. Sophie remained the same, quiet during meals, polite but distant, lost in thoughts she never shared. Elian constantly wondered if he was failing as a father, if he should seek professional help, if drastic changes might help or make things worse. The truth was he no longer knew how to reach her. He tried talking, but she responded with single words. He tried doing activities together, but she took part without enthusiasm. It was as though an invisible wall separated them, built by a grief neither knew how to process. At least at work, things ran smoothly. Projects advanced, clients were satisfied, the company thrived. It was the only area of his life where Elian still felt competent, but it wasn't enough. On the night before visiting the mansion, he stayed in the living room looking over the documents spread on the coffee table. Floor plans, deeds, old photographs. He still couldn't quite believe he'd bought a property without even seeing it. It was completely unlike his usual cautious self. But maybe that was exactly what he needed. Something impulsive. Something that forced him out of the paralysis he'd lived in for 2 years. Marcus was right when he said this wasn't Elian's style, but it was done. Tomorrow, he would finally visit the place he now owned. Maybe he'd discover he'd made a terrible financial decision. Maybe he'd discover real potential for a hotel. Or maybe he'd discover something completely different. The mansion was even bigger than Elian had imagined. Standing before the rusted iron gate, he looked at the stone facade covered in ivy. The windows were foggy and dirty, some boarded up with planks. The garden had become a jungle of tall weeds and wild shrubs. Even so, the structure looked solid. It had real potential. Elian unlocked the gate with the key the auctioneer had given him. The metal squeaked as it opened, revealing a path of cracked stones that led to the main door. His footsteps echoed as he walked, breaking the heavy silence around the place. The front door was locked with 2 new padlocks. Elian frowned. The documents hadn't mentioned extra padlocks. But then again, the place had been abandoned for years. Maybe it was some extra security measure by the local council. He went around the mansion looking for another entrance. On the left side, he found a service door with just an old, broken padlock. He pushed a bit and managed to open it. The smell of mold and dampness hit him as soon as he stepped in. He was in some kind of pantry that led to a huge kitchen. Dusty plates were still stacked on shelves, as if the former residents had left in the middle of a meal and never returned. Elian turned on his phone's flashlight and began to explore. The kitchen led to a long corridor with several doors, a dining room with a 12-person table, a living room with armchairs covered in white sheets, a library with empty shelves except for a few forgotten books. Each room confirmed his suspicions. With a good renovation, this mansion could become an incredible hotel. It had charm, history, and enough space for at least 15 comfortable suites. He went upstairs to the second floor. More bedrooms, more bathrooms, more possibilities. The windows offered a lovely view of the land and the trees at the back. Guests would pay a lot for that kind of peace. He was heading back down the stairs when he heard it. A muffled noise, like someone had dropped something. Elian paused on the landing, listening intently. Silence. Maybe it was just the old structure making noises, wood contracting, ancient pipes settling. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. It was coming from below, from the basement. Elian descended the rest of the stairs slowly, following the sound. In the kitchen, he found a door he hadn't noticed before. It stood slightly ajar, revealing stone steps leading into darkness. The basement? More noises. Definitely not just the house settling. It sounded like movement, as if someone was walking around down there. Elian hesitated. It could be a homeless person who found shelter, or a teenager messing around. Or something worse. Maybe he should call the police. But it was his property now, and he needed to know what was going on. He went down the steps carefully, lighting the way with his phone. The basement was large, divided into several sections, old boxes, covered furniture, and some ancient equipment he couldn't identify. Then he saw a faint light coming from a far corner. It wasn't electric light. It looked like candlelight. Elian walked toward the light, trying not to make a sound. He rounded a pile of boxes and stopped. There were 3 children there. A girl who looked about 6 was sitting on the floor, holding 2 smaller children in her lap. Twins, from what he could see, no older than 2. All 3 of them were filthy, wearing clothes that were torn and too big. The older girl had tangled brown hair and enormous eyes that reflected the candlelight. The little ones clung to her as if she was the only safe thing in the world. But what struck him most was how they had arranged themselves. Old boxes set up as beds, with threadbare blankets on top. Jars and bottles neatly placed on a makeshift shelf, folded clothes in a corner. It looked permanent. Elian was paralyzed. He hadn't expected this. He didn't know what to do. The older girl saw him and shrank back, pulling the twins closer to her. But there was a certain steadiness in her gaze that took Elian by surprise. "Please, don't call the police," she said in a small but resolute voice. "We live here." Elian lowered his flashlight to avoid blinding her. "How long have you been here?" "More than a month. Since before the last big rain." "More than a month." They weren't casual trespassers or lost children. They'd been making this basement their home. "Where are your parents?" The girl lowered her eyes. "No, Dad. And Mom died before we came here." The simplicity of her statement hit Elian like a punch. There was no drama, no tears, just a terrible acceptance from a child who learned far too young how cruel life could be. "How did you find this place?" "We were walking and saw that the back door was kind of open. It looked like a safe place to sleep. So we stayed." Elian looked around at their setup again. It showed logic and care. The girl had built a system to survive with 2 toddlers. "What are your names?" "I'm Amelie. These are Luna and Chloe. They're twins. And you take care of them." Amelie nodded seriously. "Someone has to." "They're little." 6 years old, taking care of 2 two-year-olds. It was impossible. Yet it was happening right in front of him. "Do you have food?" Amelie hesitated. "We manage. There are places to get stuff, and sometimes people are nice." Hunger. They'd been living in constant hunger. One of the twins, Luna or Chloe, he couldn't tell, started crying softly. Amelie immediately began rocking her, making soothing sounds. "Shh, it's okay. Amelie's here." The way she cared for her younger sisters was heartbreaking. Far too much responsibility for someone so little, but she was dealing with it all alone for over a month. "Why didn't you look for help? People who could take care of you?" Amelie looked at him with a mix of fear and distrust. "We tried before, but they wanted to separate us. Said I was too young to take care of them. But I can take care of them. I know I can." There was deep pain in those words. Someone had tried to separate the sisters before. "Don't you have anybody else?" "No family." Amelie shook her head. "It's just us 3. We take care of each other." Elian crouched to be at their level. The twins pulled closer to Amelie, but she kept staring at him with surprising courage. "Are you going to send us away?" she asked. The question was direct, with no beating around the bush, as if she was already bracing for the answer. Elian had no idea what to say. Legally, they were trespassing. In practice, they were 3 abandoned children in dire need of help. When did your mom die? 2 months ago. She got sick and couldn't get out of bed. One day, she just wouldn't wake up anymore. 2 months. Amelie had been caring for the twins alone for 2 months, and you've been on your own ever since. We stayed in the building where we lived with Mom for a few weeks, but the landlord said we had to go because we couldn't pay, so we came here. Elian pictured their journey, a 6-year-old girl and 2 toddlers, evicted and wandering until they found an abandoned mansion. How had they survived? How did you get here? Walking. It took a while. The girls are heavy to carry. Elian's stomach churned. Amelie had carried 2 toddlers for miles until she found shelter. Are you hungry now? Amelie hesitated again, as if admitting hunger was risky. We ate yesterday. Yesterday. Not today. Elian stood up, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do, but he knew he couldn't just walk away and pretend he hadn't seen them. I'll think of something. Amelie nodded, without much hope. Okay. We understand if you don't want us here. It's your house now. But there was a silent plea in her eyes, a wordless request not to destroy the only safety they had managed to create. Elian climbed the stairs on shaky legs. He left the mansion and stood in the overgrown garden, trying to process what he had just seen. 3 children living in the basement of his property for over a month, a 6-year-old girl keeping 2 toddlers alive on her own. This wasn't a temporary situation. They had made that basement their home. They had a routine, an organization, a survival system. It was his property, his responsibility to decide what to do. But it wasn't a simple decision. Nothing about this was simple. Elian got into his car and drove home on autopilot, his mind completely overwhelmed by the image of those 3 children in the basement, by Amelie's determined eyes, by the way the twins clung to her. He arrived home still shaken. Sophie was in the living room doing homework, silent as always. He watched her for a moment. She was 6, like Amelie. But Sophie had a home, food, clean clothes, school. She had someone to care for her, even if he wasn't the best father in the world. Amelie had a cold basement and 2 younger sisters to keep alive. The unfairness of the situation filled him with anger. Anger at the world, at the circumstances, at his own helplessness in the face of a situation he didn't know how to solve. He prepared dinner mechanically. Sophie ate in silence, as always. He barely touched his food. His mind kept returning to the basement, to Amelie's determined eyes, to the twins who depended on her completely, to her question, "Are you going to send us away?" That night, after Sophie went to bed, Elian sat in the living room thinking, he could call social services in the morning. That was the protocol, the right thing to do. But Amelie said they'd already tried to separate them before. What if it happened again? What if the sisters were placed in different families? What if Amelie lost the only people she had left? There were too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. Elian spent the night awake, torn between what logic told him to do and a deeper feeling he couldn't ignore: compassion. The next morning, Elian tried to immerse himself in work, but it was useless. Seated at his desk, with spreadsheets open on his computer and reports scattered around, his mind kept drifting back to that mansion basement, to Amelie's determined eyes, to the twins clinging to her like she was their entire world. "We live here." That phrase echoed in his head. There had been no desperation in her voice, just a simple statement, like living in a damp basement with 2 toddlers was the most normal thing in the world. Marcus walked into the office with more paperwork. "The shopping mall quotes are ready, and the client in the north side wants a meeting this afternoon." Elian nodded, not really hearing. He was thinking about how Amelie had set up a neat system down there. Boxes for beds, jars on a makeshift shelf, a corner for clothes. A 6-year-old child creating a functional home to survive with 2 babies. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, frowning. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You've been distant since yesterday." Elian forced himself to focus on the computer screen. Just a backlog of work. But it wasn't that. It was the image of those 3 children haunting him. Amelie's question, "Are you going to send us away?" and how she'd braced herself for a yes, as if rejection was something she expected. The morning crawled by. Elian reviewed documents without absorbing them, joined phone calls without really paying attention, signed papers automatically. His mind was someplace else entirely. By lunchtime, he gave up pretending he could concentrate. "I'm leaving early today," he told Marcus. "Meeting with the client. Later. I have something else to take care of first." Elian stopped at a grocery store on his way to the mansion. He wandered the aisles without fully knowing what he was doing. What kind of food could a 6-year-old manage to prepare? What do 2-year-olds eat? He grabbed bread, milk, fruit, cookies, simple items that required little to no preparation. He added some cans, tuna, sardines, corn, boxes of juice, yogurt. Standing in the checkout line, he wondered what exactly he was doing. Maybe he was complicating everything. Perhaps he should just call social services. That was the official procedure, the correct step. But he couldn't shake the image of Amelie carrying 2 toddlers for miles until she found shelter. He reached the mansion with 2 full shopping bags. He circled around to the service door, carefully descended the steps to the basement, not wanting to startle them. "Amelie?" he called softly before entering the area they used. "We're here," came the cautious reply. Elian rounded the boxes and found the 3 in the same spot as before. Amelie sitting with the twins on her lap, all of them watching him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the bags. Amelie's eyes widened at the sight of the grocery bags, but she didn't move, she just kept observing. Elian began taking items out, placing them on the floor in front of them, bread, milk, fruit, cookies. With each item, he watched Amelie's expression transform. It wasn't just hunger, it was relief. "These are for you," he said. "Why?" Amelie asked warily. It was a fair question. People rarely helped without wanting something in return. She had learned that all too early. "Because you're hungry." Amelie studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly, she released one of the twins and crawled over to the food. She picked up an apple and examined it like it was precious. "Thank you," she said quietly. The twins, seeing their older sister move toward the food, started moving as well. One of them, Luna, he thought, pointed to a banana and made a sound that probably meant she wanted it. Amelie immediately took the banana and peeled it for her sister. The care in her movements was touching, each gesture calculated to look after the toddlers first. "Aren't you going to eat?" Elian asked. "I will after they finish." Always others first. Always putting her own needs aside. Elian sat on the floor, keeping a respectful distance. He watched as Amelie handed out food to the twins before taking anything for herself. When she finally bit into a piece of bread, she closed her eyes like it was the best meal she'd ever had. "How long has it been since you ate a proper meal?" he asked. "Yesterday we got some soup from a church. Before that, 2 days, I think." 2 days, 2-year-olds going 2 days without eating. One of the twins, Chloe maybe, finished her banana and crawled toward Elian. Amelie immediately tensed. "Chloe, come back." But the small child kept approaching, curious. She stopped a few inches away from Elian and looked up at him with big eyes. "Hi," he said softly. Chloe smiled, a small, shy smile, but genuine. "She likes you," Amelie said, surprised. "Do you like me?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. Amelie studied him for a moment. "You brought food, and you didn't call the police." It wasn't exactly a yes, but it was a start. They stayed like that for about an hour, Elian watching the girls eat, Amelie carefully distributing the food, the twins exploring new tastes. It was strange and touching all at once. When he stood to leave, something unexpected happened. Amelie came up to him, hesitated for a second, then extended her small hand to touch his, just for a moment. Her fingers were thin and cold, but the gesture was deliberate. "Thank you," she said again. The touch lasted only a moment, but something changed. It was as if she had decided he was safe, at least for now. "I'll come back tomorrow," Elian said. Amelie nodded. "We'll be here." On his way home, Elian wondered what on earth he was doing. He had no plan, no idea where this was headed. He only knew he couldn't forget those children. The next day, he returned with more food. This time, he also brought some old blankets from his house. The basement was cold, and the girls had only scraps to cover themselves. Amelie greeted him with less distrust. The twins already seemed to remember him. Luna even reached out her arms when she saw him. "I brought blankets," he said. "Why do you keep coming back?" Amelie asked as she examined the thick blankets. "I'm not sure," Elian answered honestly, and it was true. He didn't fully understand what drew him to that basement every day. Maybe it was the way Amelie cared for her sisters. Maybe it was the sense of responsibility he felt after finding them, or maybe something deeper. "Do you have kids?" Amelie asked. "I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 6, like you." "Where is she?" "At school. Then she'll stay with the nanny until I get home." Amelie nodded thoughtfully. It must be nice to have a real house. The simplicity of that remark hit Elian. Sophie complained when her food wasn't exactly how she wanted. Amelie was grateful for any scraps. "Would you like me to fix this area up a bit?" he asked impulsively. Amelie looked at him intently. "What do you mean?" "Clean, bring more things, make it more comfortable. You'd let us stay?" The question came loaded with cautious hope, as if she didn't want to hope too much but couldn't help it. "For now, yes." Amelie smiled, the first real smile he'd seen on her face. "We'll help. We know how to work." Over the next few days, Elian established a routine. He left the office a bit earlier, stopped by the supermarket, then headed to the mansion. He brought food, cleaning supplies, and items to make the basement more livable. Amelie helped with everything: sweeping, organizing, caring for the twins while he cleaned higher areas. She was incredibly mature for her age, but sometimes she slipped into childlike moments. She laughed when the twins did something funny, hummed quietly while she tidied up. During one visit, he brought a basin of warm water and soap so they could bathe. The twins were overjoyed at the warm water, laughing and splashing as Amelie washed them gently. "They haven't had a warm bath in a long time," Amelie explained, watching her sisters play. "And what about you?" "I take a quick bath when they're sleeping, with cold water from the faucet upstairs." Elian noticed that Amelie always put the twins first, in food, baths, comfort, always the little ones first. "You deserve care too," he said. Amelie looked at him in surprise, as if that idea had never occurred to her. "Someone has to take care of them. And who takes care of you?" She didn't answer, just kept washing Luna's hair. On another visit, Elian brought clothes. He had gone to a children's store and bought some basics. He wasn't sure of their sizes, so he got a range. Amelie held a clean t-shirt against her chest like it was made of gold. "Is it really ours?" "Yes, it's yours." She helped the twins try on the new clothes. Chloe giggled when she saw her reflection in a puddle wearing a pink t-shirt. Luna clapped when she managed to put on the small sneakers. It was during these moments that Elian saw the child beneath Amelie's burden. She smiled at the twins' happiness, made funny faces to make them laugh. "Tell me about your mom," he said one day. Amelie's face closed up slightly. "Why?" "I'm just curious. You don't have to talk if you don't want to." Amelie was silent for a moment, watching the twins play with the wooden blocks Elian had brought. She was nice, always tired but nice. She worked nights cleaning offices. During the day, she slept a little and then took care of us. "What about the twins' father?" "Never met him. Mum said he left when he found out there would be 2. "And your dad?" Amelie shrugged. "I don't know who he is. Mum never talked about him." 3 little girls, each with their own story of abandonment. "When did she get sick?" "About 4 months ago. She started coughing a lot, then couldn't work anymore. We couldn't pay the rent." "How did you survive?" "Mum sold the stuff in our apartment: TV, fridge, furniture. When there was nothing left, we ate whenever we could." Amelie recounted everything with a terrifying calm, as if hunger and despair were just facts of life. Near the end, she was in bed all the time, couldn't even stand up. "I took care of the twins." "How old were you?" 5. I turned 6 last month. 5 years old, taking care of 2 babies while her mother slowly died in the next room. On the last day, she called me over and said I was responsible for the twins now, that I had to always take care of them and keep us together. Amelie looked at the twins, who were trying to stack the blocks. The next day, she didn't wake up anymore. I waited 2 days for her to wake up. Then I realized she never would. What did you do? We stayed in the apartment until the landlord came and kicked us out. Then we started walking, slept in parks, under bridges, in store doorways, until we found this place. The journey she described so simply was actually an odyssey of survival, a 6-year-old girl keeping 2 toddlers alive on the streets. You never thought about asking for help? I did. Once we went to a police station, but they wanted to send the twins one place and me somewhere else. They said I was too young to care for them. And you ran away. Yes. Mom said to keep us together. That's what I'm doing. The determination in her voice was astounding. No doubt, no hesitation, just an absolute certainty that her mission in life was to protect her sisters. During these conversations, Elian began to understand what was happening inside him. It wasn't just pity or social responsibility, it was something deeper. Amelie reminded him of himself right after Lena died, the feeling that he had to be strong for Sophie, that he couldn't break down because there was someone smaller depending on him. The difference was that he had resources, support, structure. Amelie had only her own determination, and he was seeing how strength could exist even in a 6-year-old child. His visits became daily. Elian rearranged his schedule at work to have time to go to the mansion every day. Marcus started asking questions, but he avoided answering. The basement was becoming livable. Elian installed some lamps, brought rugs, and organized a separate area for each purpose. A corner for sleeping, one for eating, a space for the twins to play. Amelie helped with everything, always carrying one of the twins or keeping both close. She never let them out of her sight. "Do you trust me now?" he asked one day. Amelie considered the question seriously. "I think so. You keep coming back, and you don't lie." "How do you know I don't lie?" "People who lie talk too much." "You talk little." Her observation made him laugh. It was true. He was always sparse with words. "And you like it when we're happy," Amelie added. "Bad people don't like it when kids are happy." There was a sad wisdom in her statement. How many bad people had she encountered to be able to make that distinction? As the days passed, Elian realized that visiting the mansion had become the best part of his day. Seeing the girls' progress, how they smiled more, how the twins started to say new words. Luna had learned to say Eli, her version of Elian. Chloe would get excited whenever he showed up. And Amelie began to talk more, asking questions about the world outside the basement. But it was more than that. For the first time since Lena's death, Elian felt like he was doing something that really mattered, not just working or surviving, but truly making a difference in someone's life. The hotel project had been completely forgotten. The papers were shoved into a drawer at the office, untouched. The mansion had found a much more important purpose than hosting tourists. One evening, after a particularly good visit, the twins had played in warm water while Amelie invented funny stories. Elian drove home feeling a strange sensation in his chest. Contentment. That was it. For the first time in 2 years, he felt genuinely useful. He arrived home and found Sophie doing homework at the kitchen table, as usual. But this time, something different happened. She looked up when he walked in. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, kiddo." They looked at each other for a moment. Sophie seemed to want to say something, but she didn't. During dinner, Elian found himself watching his daughter differently. She was 6, like Amelie. But they lived in completely different worlds. Sophie complained if the food wasn't how she liked it. Amelie thanked him for anything she got. Sophie had rooms full of toys she hardly used. The twins played with simple wooden blocks and warm water. It wasn't Sophie's fault. It was just the difference in how they grew up. But making that comparison made him realize something. Maybe Sophie also needed something different. Maybe she, too, felt trapped in a routine that wasn't nourishing her. That night, after Sophie went to bed, and she actually fell asleep without tossing and turning for hours like she'd been doing, Elian stayed in the living room, thinking about how to bridge these two situations. His lonely, withdrawn daughter, and 3 girls who had formed a makeshift family in an abandoned mansion. He didn't know how yet, but he felt there was a connection to be made. Something more valuable was happening at the mansion than just renovations or a hotel project. Something that might help not only Amelie and the twins, but Sophie as well. and maybe even himself. Elian watched Sophie pushing her cereal around her bowl the next morning, lost in her silent thoughts. For 2 weeks, he'd been visiting the girls daily. The contrast between their realities was clearer every day. Amélie, who cared for 2 tiny children with a responsibility beyond her 6 years. Sophie, who had everything she needed but seemed to fade a little more with each passing day. Maybe it was time to try something different. "Sophie," he said, sitting beside her at the table, "how about coming with me today?" She lifted her eyes from the bowl, a spark of curiosity appearing for the first time in weeks. "Where?" "To a house I bought. There are some kids there I'd like you to meet." Sophie frowned. "What kids?" "3 girls, one is your age." "Why are they in a house you bought?" It was a fair question. Elian chose his words carefully. They needed a place to stay. It's complicated to explain, but you'll understand when you meet them. Sophie thought for a moment. "Can I leave if I don't like it?" "Of course, it's just a visit." She nodded slowly. "Okay." In the car on the way to the mansion, Sophie stared out the window quietly. Elian wondered if he was doing the right thing. The situations were so different it might be awkward for everyone. But something in his gut said this meeting could be important. He didn't know how or why, he just felt it. "The girls have been through difficult things," he explained while driving. "They might seem different from your school friends." "Different how?" "More serious, more cautious. They had to grow up too fast." Sophie nodded without asking more. They arrived at the mansion and Elian parked near the side entrance. Sophie looked at the building curiously. "It's huge." "Yeah. One day it might become a hotel. And the girls live here." "For now, yes." Elian guided Sophie through the service door and down to the basement. The place was unrecognizable compared to 2 weeks earlier. Clean, organized, with rugs on the floor and lamps that gave it a cozy feel. "Amélie," he called before they reached the corner where they stayed. "I brought someone to meet you." "We're here," came the familiar voice. They rounded the neatly stacked boxes and found the 3 girls in their usual spot, Amélie sitting with the twins close by. All of them looked curiously at the girl Elian had brought. Sophie stopped behind her father, half hiding. "This is Sophie, my daughter," Elian said. "Sophie, this is Amélie, Luna, and Chloe." Amélie stood slowly, assessing the situation. The twins clung to her legs, a bit scared by the stranger's presence. "Hi," Amélie said simply. Sophie didn't answer right away. She was looking around, taking in the makeshift space, the neatly folded clothes in a box, the simple toys spread on the floor. "Hi," she finally said, in a quiet voice. Elian felt the tension in the air. 4 little girls studying each other, trying to figure things out. "You're about the same age," he said, trying to break the ice. Amélie nodded. "Do you go to school?" she asked Sophie. "I go to Riverside School." "That's nice. I'm not going to school right now." "Why not?" Amélie hesitated, looking at Elian to gauge how much she could say. "It's complicated," she finally answered. Sophie accepted that answer without pressing. She kept observing the twins who peeked out from behind Amélie. "Are they sisters?" Sophie asked. "They're twins, Luna and Chloe. They look alike." "They do, but they're different. Luna talks more, Chloe laughs more." As if to prove the point, Chloe giggled when she heard her name. Sophie almost smiled. Almost. Elian sat down on one of the rugs he'd brought, indicating Sophie could do the same. She settled next to him, still taking in everything. "How did you get hurt?" Sophie asked, noticing a scratch on Amélie's arm. "Oh, I tore it on a fence when I was looking for..." Amélie stopped, glancing again at Elian. "Looking for what?" Sophie insisted. "Food," Amélie said simply. Sophie frowned. "Food? In a fence?" "No, behind the fence." Sometimes people throw away good stuff. The silence that followed was heavy. Sophie was processing what she'd just heard. "You don't have food at home?" "We live here now," Amélie explained. "Your dad brings us food." Sophie looked at Elian with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Dad, can I talk to you?" They stepped aside, still within sight of the other girls. "They don't have a home?" Sophie asked quietly. "Not exactly. What about their parents?" They have no parents. Amelie takes care of the twins by herself. Sophie looked back at the three. Amelie sat down again, Luna in her lap, Chloe playing with wooden blocks beside them. She's 6 like me. Yes. And she's taking care of 2 little kids on her own? Yes. Sophie was silent for a long moment. That's really hard. It's very hard. They returned to the others. Sophie sat on the rug, this time a bit closer. Do you know how to draw? She asked Amelie. A little. Why? I like to draw. I brought paper and pencils in my backpack. Elian was surprised. Sophie hadn't mentioned she'd brought drawing supplies. She hadn't drawn at home for months. Sophie took a folder out of her bag, along with a box of colored pencils. Amelie gazed at the pencils as if they were treasure. So many colors, she said, amazed. Do you want to use them? Sophie offered. Amelie hesitated. Really? Sure. Sophie opened the folder and took out 2 sheets of paper. She handed one to Amelie along with half the colored pencils. What do you want to draw? Sophie asked. I'm not sure. What are you going to draw? I haven't decided yet. They sat side by side, each with her own sheet. Elian watched, fascinated at how Sophie seemed more alive than she'd been in months. There was color in her cheeks, interest in her eyes. Amelie held the pencils carefully, as if they were fragile. She chose a light blue and started drawing something that looked like a sky. Sophie picked a green pencil and began drawing grass. Are you making a garden? Amelie asked. I think so. What about you? The sky. I like looking at the sky from here. You can see it through the small windows. Sophie glanced up, noticing the tiny basement windows that let in a bit of light. It must be pretty at night. It is. Sometimes we see stars. The twins inched closer, curious about what the older girls were doing. Luna pointed to the pencils and said something that sounded like pretty. She likes colors, Amelie explained. When we used to walk around, she always stopped to look at flowers. I have a garden at my house, Sophie said. It has lots of different flowers. That must be nice. Yeah, but I never really stopped to look at them. Amelie looked at her curiously. Why not? Sophie thought about it. I don't know, I never thought about it. They kept drawing in silence for a few more minutes. Elian was amazed at the change in Sophie. She was smiling. Not just a polite smile, but a real smile. Can I draw on your paper too? Sophie asked. Sure, Amelie said, sliding her sheet to the center. Sophie began adding elements to Amelie's drawing, some clouds in the blue sky, a few birds flying. Amelie drew some trees. The twins kept scribbling colorful lines everywhere. That looks like a flower, Sophie said, pointing to a shape Luna had drawn. Luna loves flowers, Amelie explained. When we walked around town, she'd always stop to look at them. We have a garden at home, Sophie repeated, but I don't usually look at it. Amelie gave her a quizzical look. Maybe you should. They continued drawing for another hour, chatting, with the twins trying to repeat words Sophie said. Luna managed to say Sophie, which sounded more like Sophie. But Sophie was delighted. She learned my name. She's clever, Amelie said proudly. They both are. When it was time to leave, Sophie seemed reluctant. Can we come back? She asked her dad. If you want to. I do. Sophie turned to Amelie. Can I leave my colored pencils here? For you and the girls to draw when I'm not around. Amelie's eyes widened. Really leave them? Yeah, I have more at home. Thank you. Amelie approached and gave Sophie a quick hug. Spontaneous, genuine. Sophie returned it, and for a moment it seemed they had known each other for years. Bye, Luna, bye, Chloe, Sophie said to the twins, who waved their little hands. In the car on the way home, Sophie was quiet for a few minutes. Elian let her process everything she'd experienced. Then, out of nowhere, she burst into laughter. It wasn't a small, polite laugh. It was spontaneous, free, full of life. What is it? Elian asked, surprised. Luna tried to eat the red pencil. Amelie took it out of her mouth and she made the funniest face. Sophie laughed again at the memory. Elian's heart raced. When was the last time Sophie laughed like that? When was the last time she told him something about her day with such excitement? Not since Lena's funeral. Not since that terrible day 2 years ago had Sophie laughed so spontaneously and carefree. "Amelie's nice," Sophie went on. "She takes such good care of her sisters and they really love her. They do. It must be hard to take care of two little kids. Very hard. But she makes it seem normal. Like it's natural." Elian nodded, thinking about how Amelie really did make it look natural. Responsibility, care, protection, all woven into her personality so seamlessly. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Are they going to stay there forever?" The question caught him off guard. He hadn't thought in terms of forever. He'd been taking it one day at a time, trying to help as he could. "I don't know, Sophie. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "There are rules about where children can live, people who decide these things." Sophie was thoughtful. "What if those people say they can't stay together?" "I don't know what would happen." "That would be bad. They need to stay together." The certainty in Sophie's voice surprised him. In just one afternoon, she'd grasped something fundamental about those three girls. "Why do you think they need to stay together?" "Because they love each other. It's obvious. And Amelie promised to take care of her sisters. Separating them would be like breaking a family." Breaking a family. At 6 years old, Sophie was pointing out the heart of the issue. "You're right. So we have to help them stay together. Sophie already counted herself in the solution. They got home, and Sophie got out of the car with more energy than Elian had seen in months. During dinner, she talked about Luna and Chloe, how different they were despite being twins, and about the drawings they'd made together. "Amelie said Luna loves flowers," Sophie remarked. "Can I bring some from our garden next time?" "Sure. And maybe some toys I don't use anymore, for the twins." Elian watched his daughter speak with excitement about something for the first time in 2 years. It was as if a light had switched on inside her. That night, after Sophie went to bed and she actually went to sleep, no tossing and turning, Elian sat in the living room reflecting on what he'd witnessed. Sophie had found something in that basement he couldn't give her at home. Purpose, connection, a feeling of being useful to someone else. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she'd found other kids who understood what it was like to lose someone important, who knew life could be more complicated than it should be. Whatever it was working. For the first time since Lena's death, Elian felt his heart truly opening, not just for Amelie and the twins, but for all the possibilities unfolding. Maybe he could help those girls in a more permanent way. Maybe he could create something that would benefit everyone involved. Maybe he could build a family where there had only been survival. Sophie's spontaneous laughter in the car echoed in his mind. That simple sound had changed everything for him. His heart was beginning to open to possibilities he hadn't known existed. Mornings in Elian's house changed completely. Where once there had been heavy silence and mechanical gestures, now there were movement, voices, life. The alarm rang at 6:30, but it was barely necessary. Luna and Chloe woke up naturally with the sun, and their morning babble served as an alarm for the whole house. Elian had transformed the old study into a bedroom for the three girls. 2 small beds and a pull-out bed, all with colorful sheets that Sophie had chosen herself. Amelie slept in one of the small beds, the twins shared the other, and Sophie insisted on sleeping on the pull-out bed whenever she could. "It's like camping," she explained, "only better because it's every day." On that Tuesday morning, Elian went downstairs and found Amelie already awake, sitting on the living room floor playing with the twins. She always woke up first, an instinct developed during her months of caring for her sisters alone. "Good morning," he said, noticing how Amelie smiled when she saw him. 2 weeks ago, she would only nod when he appeared. Now she smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Good morning, Elian. They woke up just a little while ago." "And you? Did you sleep well?" "I did." Amelie was still tight-lipped about herself, but she looked more at ease. Her shoulders weren't constantly tense anymore, always poised to defend her sisters from danger. Elian began preparing breakfast, a routine he'd learned for 4 children instead of just 1. Oatmeal for the twins, cereal for Sophie, toast for Amelie, who still ate slowly, as if she couldn't quite believe there was enough food. Sophie showed up in her pajamas, hair a mess, rubbing her eyes. "Are the girls up yet?" "They are." They're in the living room with Amélie. Sophie ran to the living room. Elian heard laughter from there and smiled. Sophie laughing first thing in the morning was still something he was getting used to. He went back to focusing on breakfast, cutting fruit into small pieces for the twins, heating the milk to the right temperature, setting aside vitamins the pediatrician recommended. 2 weeks of intensive medical appointments had confirmed that all 3 girls were surprisingly healthy, given everything they'd been through. Luna was slightly underweight, Chloe had mild anemia, Amélie needed some dental care, nothing that couldn't be fixed with proper attention. "Elian," Sophie yelled from the living room, "Chloe's trying to say a new word." He left the food on the stove and walked in. He found the 4 girls sitting in a circle on the living room rug. Sophie and Amélie on either side, the twins in the middle. Chloe was pointing at Sophie, making sounds that almost formed a word. So. Chloe struggled, concentrating hard. "She's trying to say Sophie," Amélie explained proudly. "Sophie," Chloe finally managed. Sophie clapped her hands, thrilled. "She said my name, Amélie, she said my name." The excitement was contagious. Luna tried too, and soon the twins were competing to see who could say Sophie more clearly. Elian watched them with a tightness in his chest, the good kind, a joyful ache, a sense of family. "Breakfast is ready," he announced. "We're coming," Sophie called, helping Amélie lift the twins. Each girl had her spot at the kitchen table, Sophie next to Amélie, the twins in special chairs Elian had bought, and Elian himself seated across from them, coordinating the logistics of the meal. "Luna, don't throw food on the floor," Amélie said gently, wiping her sister's hand with a towel. "I'll help," Sophie offered, grabbing another towel to clean Chloe's hands. The natural way they cared for each other amazed Elian every day. Sophie had become a dedicated older sister, and Amélie had relaxed enough to allow others to help with the twins. "I'll drop you 2 at school today," Elian said to Sophie and Amélie. Amélie had started attending the same school as Sophie the previous week. The first few days were tough. She didn't know how to interact with other kids, was always worried about the twins at home with the nanny. But Sophie helped, introducing Amélie to her friends, sharing her lunch, sitting next to her in class. Within a few days, Amélie began to relax at school too. "The teacher said we have a family project this Friday," Sophie mentioned. "What kind of project?" Elian asked. "We each talk about our family, draw pictures, tell stories." Amélie stopped eating for a moment. "What kinds of stories?" "Good things, how you have fun together, places you like to go, traditions." "What if someone asks how our family got together?" Amélie asked cautiously. Elian and Sophie exchanged a look. It was a valid concern. Their situation wasn't exactly standard. "Just share whatever you feel comfortable sharing," Elian said. "Family is about taking care of each other. That's what you do." Amélie nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. After breakfast came the routine of getting everyone ready, brushing teeth, changing clothes, packing backpacks. Elian had become surprisingly efficient at this. The twins stayed with Elena, the nanny he'd hired specifically to care for them. Elena was an experienced woman who had fallen in love with the twins from day one. "They'll play in the backyard if it doesn't rain," Elena said, picking Luna up. "And Chloe is almost saying water properly." "Wawa," Chloe shouted as if to prove it. "Almost," Luna laughed, clapping her hands. Their morning goodbyes had become a ritual. Sophie kissed the twins' cheeks. Amélie hugged them tightly and whispered something in each twin's ear. Elian offered a funny handshake that made them all giggle. In the car on the way to school, Sophie and Amélie discussed their plans for the day. Amélie was starting to like art class. Sophie was excited about a science project. "Can I tell people at school I have twin sisters?" Sophie asked. "Sure," Amélie replied. "They really are your sisters now." The ease with which they referred to each other as sisters still astonished Elian. It hadn't been forced. No one explained it. It just happened. After dropping them off, Elian went to the office. Marcus no longer asked questions about Elian's changed schedule. The projects continued. Clients were happy, but Elian was clearly dividing his attention. "Is the mansion project shelved?" Marcus asked one morning. "What project?" "The hotel." "The mansion you bought." Elian had all but forgotten the idea of a hotel. The mansion now served a much more important purpose as the place where all of this began. "It won't be a hotel," he said simply. "Then what?" "A country house for my family." Marcus nodded without pressing. He already understood that Elian's life had changed fundamentally. Afternoons were devoted to picking up the girls from school and returning home to more family routines. Snacks, homework for Sophie and Amélie, playtime with the twins, dinner, bath, bedtime stories. Elian had learned how to manage it all, how to prepare snacks Amélie liked. She still preferred simple flavors and distrusted fancier foods, how to pack school bags the night before so nothing would be forgotten, how to handle the twins' cries when they were tired. Luna responded to music, Chloe needed to be held. And how to celebrate the laughter. Sophie laughing at Luna's attempts to count to 5. Amélie laughing when Chloe tried to mimic her sounds. The twins laughing at anything and everything, simply for the joy of it. The house was always full of sound now. Footsteps running up and down the stairs, animated conversations during meals, music playing while they did homework, the TV softly showing cartoons for the twins. It was the complete opposite of the heavy silence that had filled the house for 2 years. One Thursday night, as he prepared the twins for their bath, Elian realized he hadn't thought about work all day. He hadn't obsessively checked emails or taken paperwork home, hadn't stayed up late doing spreadsheets. Instead, he'd been thinking about Amélie's upcoming birthday. She would turn 7 in 2 weeks, about how to teach the twins to use regular cups instead of bottles, and about which school they should attend when they were old enough. He was thinking like a dad, not an executive who happened to have kids. His main priority was caring for these small people who depended on him. During dinner that night, he watched each of the girls. Sophie ate normally, talking about her PE class. Amélie helped Chloe use her fork properly. Luna tried to drink milk without spilling it. "Dad," Sophie said suddenly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Today at school, Emma asked me what it's like to have 3 sisters. I told her it's the best thing in the world." Amélie smiled. "Really?" "Yeah, I used to feel lonely, even with Dad around. Now I never feel lonely." Elian's chest tightened. "I'm sorry you ever felt lonely. It's not your fault. It's just, the house was so sad after Mom died. Now it's happy again." The simplicity of her observation was perfect. The house really was happy again. After dinner, while the twins played in the living room and Amélie did homework at the kitchen table, Sophie helped Elian wash dishes. "Dad?" "Yes? Is Amélie going to live here forever? Do you want her to?" "Yes. And the twins too." "Why?" Sophie thought as she dried a plate. "Because now we're a family, and families stay together." That was exactly it. They had become a family, not by blood, but by care and choice. That night, at bedtime, Elian made his usual rounds, checking that the twins were tucked in, making sure Amélie had water beside her bed, verifying that Sophie had brushed her teeth. As he left the room, Sophie called him. "Dad?" "Yes, sweetie?" "Can I tell you a secret?" Elian came back and sat on the edge of the pull-out bed where Sophie slept. "Of course." Sophie glanced over at Amélie and the twins, who were already asleep. "I always wanted siblings," she whispered. "Even before Mom died, I asked you guys to have more babies. Now I have sisters. And when I'm with them, I'm not sad." The words struck Elian like a lightning bolt. Sophie had never mentioned wanting siblings before, and to know that the presence of these girls was helping cure her sadness. "They're going to stay, Sophie. They're ours now." "Really? Forever?" "Forever." Sophie smiled in the darkness. "Good. Because I love them, and I think they love me too." "I'm sure they do." Elian kissed Sophie's forehead and left the room with his heart overflowing. In the hallway, he paused for a moment to let it all sink in. Sophie had put into words exactly what he'd been feeling. Those girls had become theirs. Not just kids he was helping for the time being, but daughters. His daughters. Amélie, with her premature maturity and her fierce loyalty to her sisters. Luna, with her curiosity and her brave attempts at new words. Chloe, with her spontaneous smiles and her way of making everyone laugh. And Sophie, who had found joy again through her love for her new sisters. Elian headed downstairs to the living room, looking at the photos that had started to appear around the house. Pictures of Sophie and Amélie doing homework together, the twins playing in the yard, all four girls painting a mural in their bedroom. A decision that had been forming for weeks finally crystallized. He wanted to be their father, truly their father. Not just a temporary guardian or a well-meaning protector. He wanted them to take his last name. He wanted to be the one they called whenever they needed something. He wanted to be there for every birthday, graduation, and important moment in their lives. He wanted them to know, without a doubt, that they belonged somewhere permanent, that they had a family that would never abandon them. The next day, he would reach out to a lawyer specializing in adoption. It was time to make official what was already real in their hearts. It was a Saturday afternoon, when Elian decided to quickly stop by the office to pick up some documents. The girls were at home with Elena, and he planned to catch up on a few tasks he'd let pile up during the week. "Can I go with you, Dad?" Sophie asked when she saw him grab the car keys. "Me too," Amélie asked, looking up from the book she was reading. "Won't you be bored? I'm just grabbing some papers." "We've never been to your office," Sophie said. "Oh, we want to see where you work." Elian smiled. "All right, but Luna and Chloe will stay with Elena. We won't be long." In the car, Sophie and Amélie chatted excitedly about what they expected to find at the office. Sophie had been there a few times when she was younger, but Amélie had never seen it. "Is it a tall building?" she asked. "Medium tall. Our company's on the 5th floor." They arrived at the commercial building, and Elian used his key card to enter. The lobby was quiet, only security lights on. They took the elevator to the 5th floor. "Drayton and Associates." Sophie read the sign on the door. "Your name's on the door, Dad." Elian unlocked the door and turned on the lights. The office was modern, with glass desks, large computers, and well-maintained plants. Several architectural models were displayed on shelves. "Wow," Amélie whispered, looking around in awe. "It's so fancy." "Thanks. That's my office back there." He pointed to a glass door at the end of the hallway. The girls followed him while he headed to his desk. Sophie immediately went to the window to see the city view, but Amélie stopped at the doorway, observing everything carefully. Elian sat in his chair, searching for the documents he needed, contracts to review, budgets to approve, things that could wait, but he preferred to take care of them. "Dad, from here you can see our school," Sophie called from the window. "Really?" "Show Amélie." Amélie walked toward the window, but paused when something on the bookshelf behind Elian's desk caught her eye. It was where he kept some technical books and a few personal photos. There was a picture of Sophie as a newborn in the hospital, another of Sophie at about 3 years old in the park, and a photo of Lena holding baby Sophie, both smiling at the camera. Amélie stared at that last photo. She went completely still, as if she'd seen a ghost. "Dad," Sophie called from the window, "aren't you coming to see?" "I'm almost done," Elian replied, still sorting papers. Then he noticed Amélie hadn't moved. She stood there, transfixed by the photo of Lena. "Amélie, are you okay?" She didn't respond right away. She kept her eyes on the photo with an expression Elian couldn't decipher. "Amélie," he repeated, getting up and walking toward her. "This woman," Amélie said softly, pointing to the picture. "Who is she?" "That's Lena, Sophie's mom, my wife. She died." "Yes, 2 years ago." Amélie kept gazing at the photo for a few more seconds. Then she turned to Elian with an expression that baffled him. She gave us food once." Elian felt his entire world tilt. "What?" "That woman, she gave us food one day, me, my mom, and the twins. She bought bread and juice. She smiled. I never forgot." Elian's heart pounded. It couldn't be a coincidence. "When? Where?" "A long time ago. The twins were so little. We were on the street near a bakery. Mom was sick and couldn't work. We were really hungry." Amélie looked back at the photo. "That woman came out of the bakery and saw us. She went back, bought bread and juice, and handed it to Mom. She smiled at me and said everything would be okay." Elian had to hold onto the desk. His legs were shaking. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I never forget kind faces. She was very kind." Sophie had come closer and was listening. "Mom helped you?" "Yes, we were so hungry, and she came out of nowhere, like an angel." Elian remembered it vaguely. Lena sometimes came home from shopping telling him she'd helped someone on the street, especially children. She could never ignore people in need. He recalled a specific day, maybe 8 or 9 months before the accident, when Lena had returned saying she'd met a family with small children who were really struggling. She'd bought them food and worried about them for days. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What is it, Dad?" Sophie asked. "Your mom. She planted the seed of this story. Without knowing it, she connected our family long before I found you in the mansion." Amelie furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" "If your mom hadn't helped you that day, maybe you wouldn't have survived long enough for me to find you in that basement. Your mom saved you so you could save Sophie." The connection was impossible to ignore. Lena had helped these children nearly a year before she died, and now these same children had rescued Sophie from sadness and isolation. "She was really your wife?" Amelie asked, still processing. "She was, and she would have adored you all. She seemed nice in the photo, and when she helped us, she was the kindest person I've ever known." Sophie approached the photo and touched it gently. "Mom helped Amelie and the twins." "She did. It's like she knew they'd be important to us." Amelie was quiet for a moment, then her expression changed, worried, almost scared. "Elian?" "Yes. Are you going to send us away?" The question came out of nowhere and took him by surprise. "Why? Why are you asking that?" "Because now you know we met your wife before. Maybe that's weird. Maybe you think we shouldn't be here." Elian understood her fear. Amelie worried the link to Lena might make everything seem manipulated or strange rather than natural. He knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Amelie, listen to me. Never. I will never send you away." "Really? Really? Do you know why?" Amelie shook her head. "Because you saved Sophie. You and your sisters brought joy back into our home. You're part of our family now. Forever. Forever." Sophie stepped forward and hugged Amelie from behind. "We're sisters now. Sisters don't separate." Amelie visibly relaxed. The fear in her eyes disappeared. "I like being part of your family. And we like having you." Elian picked up Lena's photo from the shelf. "You know what I think." "What?" both girls asked in unison. "I think Lena somehow knew. When she helped you that day, she was planting a seed." "How could she know?" Sophie asked. "I don't know. Maybe she didn't consciously know, but her heart did." Amelie looked at the photo again. "Do you think she'd be happy that we live with you now?" Elian smiled, tears in his eyes. "Absolutely. She would love seeing Sophie laugh again. She'd love seeing you safe and cared for." "Dad," Sophie spoke. "Yes? Can we put a picture of Mom in our room so Amelie and the twins can know her better?" "Sure. I have some more at home we can use." On the drive back, Amelie was quieter than usual. Elian noticed her thoughtful expression in the rearview mirror. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Your wife? How strange it is that we already met her." "Strange how? A good kind of strange, like we were meant to be part of your family." Sophie turned to look at Amelie. "I think so too. Meant to be." Elian smiled, driving with a full heart. Lena had planted this story long before she left. She had created a connection that was only now becoming clear. And he was certain that wherever she was smiling. The following Monday, Elian adjusted his tie for the 3rd time before entering the law office. He wasn't nervous about being there. He was nervous about what he was going to ask for. It was a decision that would change everything in a legal, permanent way. Robert Harrison had been the family lawyer for over a decade. He'd handled Lena's will, helped with company matters, always discreet and efficient. If anyone could help Elian with this situation, it was Robert. "Elian!" Robert stood up from his desk to greet him. "Long time no see. How's Sophie?" "Sophie's good. Really good, actually. I'm here to talk about her, among other things." Robert gestured for him to sit in the chair opposite his desk. "What can I do for you?" Elian took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed this conversation on the way over, but the words still felt huge. "How do I adopt 3 children?" Robert blinked a few times, clearly not expecting that. I'm sorry. 3 girls ages 6, 2 and 2 sisters. I want to adopt them officially. Robert leaned back in his chair, processing the information. Elian, that's very specific. Can you give me some context? For the next half hour, Elian told him everything, how he found the girls in the mansion, how he started caring for them, how they integrated into the family, how Sophie had blossomed with her new sisters, and now, the discovery that Lena had once helped them. Robert listened intently, taking occasional notes. I see, he said when Elian was done. Have the authorities been informed of the current situation? Not officially yet. I know I need to sort this out. That's why I'm here. Robert nodded thoughtfully. All right, let's talk about the process. Adopting 3 children at once is complex but not impossible, especially since they're siblings and you've already shown you can care for them. Elian leaned forward. How long does it take? It varies, from 6 months to 2 years. You go through several stages: psychological evaluations, home visits, background checks, financial reviews, interviews with the children. Can they stay with me during the process? That depends on social services. Since you found them in an unconventional way, there could be initial complications. But the fact that they're well cared for now helps your case. Elian felt a knot in his stomach. There was a real possibility he could lose the girls during the process. What's the best approach? First, we contact social services and explain the situation. Show you're acting in good faith, wanting to make everything legal. Second, we start the paperwork for the adoption application right away. Robert opened a folder and began making notes. Are you sure about this, Elian? Adoption is permanent. You'll be legally and emotionally responsible for these 3 kids for the rest of your life. I'm absolutely sure. Why? Help me understand your motivation. This will be important in the process. Elian thought for a moment. Because they're already my daughters. I just want the law to recognize what's already true. They deserve stability, a last name, a sense of belonging. They deserve to know they have a permanent place in this world. The word belonging echoed in the office. That's what Elian wanted to give the girls. Not just a temporary shelter or conditional care, but real permanent belonging. Robert jotted down more notes. All right, let's begin the paperwork. And Elian, you'll need patience. The system is slow, but it's designed to protect the children. The following weeks were a whirlwind of documents, phone calls and meetings. Robert contacted social services, explaining the situation and requesting an official evaluation. The first home visit was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Elian was more nervous than he cared to admit. Will they ask a lot of questions? Sophie asked at breakfast. Probably, but just questions to understand how our family works. What if they don't like how we live? Amélie was quiet, but Elian could see the worry in her eyes. You've done nothing wrong, he said, addressing Amélie especially. We're just trying to make official a family that already exists. The social worker arrived right on time at 9. Margaret Chen was an Asian woman in her 50s, professional but not unfriendly. Mr. Drayton, I'm Margaret Chen from Child Services. Please, come in. The girls are excited to meet you. Margaret stepped inside and surveyed the environment. Elian had learned to see the house through a stranger's eyes. Clean, organized, clearly set up for children. Toys in the right places, family photos on the walls, proper chairs at the dining table. This must be the famous zoo, Margaret remarked, smiling at a drawing on the fridge. Sophie and Amélie made that together. They love to draw. In the living room, all 4 girls were on the couch, Sophie and Amélie on either side, the twins in between, looking like a natural unit. Girls, this is Mrs. Chen. She's here to talk to us about our family. Hi, Sophie said politely. Hi, echoed Amélie, more cautiously. The twins just watched with curiosity. May I sit with you? Margaret asked. The girls made space on the couch. Margaret sat and immediately noticed how Amélie instinctively pulled Chloe closer. You're Amélie, right? I hear you take very good care of your sisters. Amélie nodded. Somebody has to. And now, Mr. Elian helps take care of everyone, right? He takes care of us all, Sophie answered. And we take care of each other. Margaret took notes while she talked to the girls, asking about their routines, what they liked to do together, how they felt in the house. "Are you happy here?" she asked them directly. "Very," Sophie answered right away. "Yes," Amelie said quietly but firmly. "And you too?" Margaret turned to the twins, who obviously wouldn't fully understand but whose reactions she was observing. Luna pointed at Elian and said, "Daddy!" clear as day. Chloe clapped and repeated, "Daddy! Daddy!" Margaret smiled genuinely for the first time. "I see." She spent 2 hours in the house, observing interactions, asking questions, making notes. Elian tried to act natural but was obviously tense. Throughout that time, Margaret watched the family's harmony, how Sophie helped Amelie with words she was still learning in English, how Amelie automatically wiped Chloe's face when she got juice on herself, how Elian knew exactly which toys would calm Luna when she got fussy. It was a functional family, not perfect but happy. Most importantly, truly happy. When it was time for the social worker to speak with him alone, Margaret led him into the kitchen. "Mr. Drayton, may I ask why you want to adopt these 3 children?" The question he'd been ready to answer for weeks. "Because my daughter is smiling again," he said simply. "Because they taught me what it means to be a father." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Could you elaborate?" "After my wife died, Sophie and I were just surviving, existing. When I found Amelie and the twins, when they joined our family, everything changed. Sophie started being a child again. I started being a real dad again. And the girls? What did they gain? Security, stability, a chance to be kids instead of just survivors." Margaret made more notes. "You understand adoption is more than offering shelter. It's a lifelong legal, emotional and financial commitment." "I understand completely. That's exactly what I want. I don't want them as my wards or my dependents. I want them as my daughters. Why? Because they already are. I just want the law to recognize that." Margaret studied his face for a long moment. "Mr. Drayton, in 20 years of doing this, I've seen many situations, some sad, some inspiring. This home, this family is special." Elian felt cautious relief. "Is that good?" "Very good. The children are clearly happy, healthy and well-adjusted. Sophie has flourished dramatically. Amelie has relaxed while keeping her special bond with the twins. The twins are developing normally. So what's next? I'll recommend that the adoption process move forward. There will be more visits and assessments, but from what I see, this is a functional family that just formed in an unusual way." As Margaret stood to leave, she paused by the living room to say goodbye to the girls. "It was lovely meeting you all," she said. "Will you come back?" Sophie asked. "Yes, a few times, while we make official what's already real." Amelie watched Margaret closely. "Are we allowed to stay?" "If it's up to me, yes. You belong here." When Margaret left, the house stayed quiet for a few minutes. The girls were processing her visit. Elian was processing the implications. "Dad?" Sophie broke the silence. "Did she like us?" "She liked you a lot." "How do you know?" "Because she saw what I see every day. A family that loves each other." Amelie approached him. "You really want to adopt us? Forever?" "I really do. Do you 3 want me to adopt you?" Amelie looked at the twins, then at Sophie, then back at him. "We're already your family. But it'd be nice to have it on paper, too." That night, after the girls were asleep, Elian called Robert. "How was the first assessment?" "Better than I expected. She's going to recommend that we proceed." "Excellent. That speeds things up. How long do you think it'll take now, with a positive recommendation?" "Maybe 6 to 8 months, especially since the children are already settled and happy." Elian ended the call feeling both relieved and excited. 6 to 8 months. In less than a year, Amelie, Luna and Chloe Drayton would officially be his daughters. The thought filled him with deep joy. They would have more than a place to live. They would have belonging. Forever. 8 months after Margaret Chen's first visit, Elian was seated in the courtroom with the 4 girls by his side. Robert Harrison organized the last few documents in front of them, while Judge Helen Morrison reviewed the case she'd been overseeing for months. "Mr. Drayton," the judge said, looking over her glasses, In my 15 years presiding over adoptions, I've rarely seen a case so well documented and with such glowing evaluations. Elian's heart pounded. The girls sat quietly beside him, Sophie and Amélie holding hands, the twins on his lap. The children are clearly integrated, happy, and thriving under your care. Social Services recommendation is unanimous. This adoption is unquestionably in the children's best interests. Judge Morrison picked up the final documents. Therefore, it is my great pleasure to declare the adoption of Amélie Marie Drayton, Luna Rose Drayton, and Chloe Grace Drayton officially approved. As of this moment, you are a family. The gavel struck, legally sealing what they had already felt in their hearts. Sophie burst into tears of joy. Amélie hugged Elian tightly. Luna and Chloe, not fully understanding but sensing the happiness, started clapping. "We're really a family now," Amélie asked, her eyes shining. "We're officially a family now," Elian replied, voice trembling with emotion. Robert came over with a huge smile. "Congratulations, Drayton family. You made history today." In the car on the way home, Sophie couldn't stop talking. "Amélie Drayton, Luna Drayton, Chloe Drayton," she repeated, as if their names were a song. "We were always sisters," Amélie said softly. "Now we share the same last name too." They arrived home to find Elena had decorated the living room with colorful streamers. Balloons were tied to the chairs, ribbons on the dining table, and a big sign reading, "Welcome to the Drayton family." "How was it?" Elena asked as soon as they walked in. "Approved!" Sophie shouted. "They're officially our sisters." Elena hugged each of the girls, showering them with affectionate words in Spanish that they'd all learned to understand. "I have a surprise for you," Sophie announced, barely containing her excitement. "I helped make a special cake to celebrate." She ran to the kitchen and came back carrying a chocolate cake with white icing. On top, in slightly crooked but carefully piped letters, it read, "Drayton family." Around it were small, colorful sugar flowers. "I wrote the names," Sophie said proudly. "Elena helped me make the cake, but I did all the decorating myself." Amélie stared at the cake with a mix of surprise and emotion. "You made this for us?" "For our family. Now we're 4 official Drayton sisters." That afternoon, while the girls played in the yard and Elena tidied the kitchen, Amélie approached Elian with a folded piece of paper in her hands. "I wrote something for you," she said shyly. Elena helped me with some tricky words. Elian unfolded the paper to find a letter in a careful, childlike handwriting. Some words were clearly corrected, others showed where someone had helped with spelling. "Dear Daddy Elian, thank you for staying. When you found us in the basement, I thought you would send us away like other people did, but you didn't. You brought food and blankets and made that place better. Then you let us live in your real house. Sophie became our sister, and you became our dad. You took care of the twins when I was too tired to do it alone. Thank you for not giving up on us. Now you are my dad. With much love, Amélie Marie Drayton, P.S. The twins want to say thank you too, but they don't know how to write yet." Elian had to sit down. The simple words of the letter hit him harder than he could have imagined. "Amélie," he called, voice trembling. She stepped closer, concerned about his reaction. "You don't like it." "I like it more than anything I've ever received in my life." He pulled her into a tight hug. "Thank you for letting me stay too. Thank you for taking care of your sisters until I found you." "We saved each other," Amélie said simply. At dusk, Elian suggested they celebrate in the backyard under the stars. They spread a big blanket on the grass, lit a few garden lanterns, creating a soft glow. All 5 of them lay there, Elian and the 4 girls, talking about weekend plans, naming the stars, and imagining shapes in the sky. Luna and Chloe were in the middle, Sophie and Amélie on either side, everyone huddled together. "It's like in the basement," Luna said, pointing at the stars, "only much prettier." "And warmer," Amélie agreed. "And family," Chloe said, one of her newly learned phrases. "Forever family," Luna added. They stayed there for over an hour, chatting softly, watching the stars, feeling content. When the girls started dozing off, Elian carried them inside one by one. It was a simple, perfect celebration. In the following weeks, the biggest change involved the mansion. Elian had decided it definitely wouldn't be a hotel. Instead, he hired a team to restore it as a weekend house for the family. "Would you like to help choose the colors?" he asked the girls one morning. "Can we really?" Amelie asked. "Of course, it's our country house now." Sophie clapped her hands. "We can do themed bedrooms." Over the next few weekends, they went on expeditions to the mansion to check on the renovations. The girls ran through the empty rooms, planning where each piece of furniture would go, choosing wallpaper. The basement, where it all began, was turned into a playroom. Elian kept one small corner, exactly as it was when he found the girls, placing a plaque that read, "Where our family began." Amelie always paused at that corner during visits. "It's strange to see how it was before," she said once. "Strange sad or strange good?" "Strange good, because now we know it had a happy ending." On their first full weekend in the newly restored mansion, Elian watched the girls explore every inch of the property with pure joy. Luna and Chloe, now almost 3, ran around the vast lawn, squealing with excitement at all the space to play. Their laughter echoed around the gardens. "Daddy," Luna called from afar, waving, "come plant flowers with us." Elian had bought colorful seedlings to create a special family garden. Luna and Chloe loved digging in the dirt, even if they ended up completely covered in it. "This will be Luna's flower," he said, helping her plant a yellow daisy. "And this one is Chloe's," Chloe announced, choosing a purple petunia. "That one's Sophie's, and that one is Amelie's," Luna added, pointing to other seedlings. "Which one is yours, Daddy?" Chloe asked. Elian looked at the garden they were creating together. "All of them are mine, because you're all my special flowers." The twins giggled at his answer. Amelie, watching from a distance, smiled in a way that showed she understood the deeper meaning. While Elian planted with the twins, Sophie and Amelie set up a small table for drawing on the mansion's porch. They had paper, colored pencils, and markers, working on what they called their family journal. "Let's draw everyone planting flowers," Sophie suggested. "Then we'll draw our first night here," Amelie added. They drew and chatted about their plans for summer vacation, about how fun it would be to have Elena come for a weekend, about teaching the twins to swim in a pool Elian was considering installing. On Sunday morning, Elian woke up early to prepare breakfast in the mansion's kitchen. Through the window, he could see the garden where they'd planted flowers the day before. Soon the girls would be up, filling the place with their voices and laughter. But that quiet morning moment gave him space to reflect on how much had changed in their lives. 2 years ago, he was a broken man emotionally, raising a silent daughter in a house full of sadness. Today, he was father to 4 happy girls, living in a house full of life, with a country home where they could make special memories. He had discovered that grief isn't something that simply goes away with time. It's something that transforms, that can coexist with new joy. The pain of losing Lena was still there, but now it lived alongside gratitude for the memories they shared and for the family she had, in a way, helped create. On Monday morning, back to the routine in the city, Elian watched his 4 daughters get ready for the day. Luna and Chloe eating breakfast in their special chairs, speaking a mix of English, childish gibberish, and their own twin language. Sophie and Amelie packing their school bags carefully, checking they had all their books and supplies. "Ready, sis?" Sophie asked Amelie when they finished. "Ready," Amelie replied, straightening her matching school uniform. The two walked hand in hand to the front gate, waiting for the school bus to pick them up. "Now we study together, sis," Amelie said, adjusting the strap on her backpack with satisfaction. "Forever," Sophie replied, smiling. Drayton sisters go to school together. Elian watched from the window, heart full. There they were, 2 little girls who had become sisters by choice, by love, by fate. One had taught the other how to laugh again. The other had taught the first what it meant to have a stable family. When the bus arrived and they climbed on board, waving happily at him, Elian felt a deep peace settle in his chest. In that simple Monday morning moment, watching 2 of his daughters head off to school together as true sisters, he realized with crystal clarity he had moved beyond grief. Not forgotten or denied it, but transformed it into something that allowed new life, new love, a new family. A new family had risen from the ashes of sorrow, and it was alive, complete, and truly happy. Luna walked into the living room carrying a picture book. "Daddy, read us a story." Chloe ran in after her. Happy family story. Elian sat on the sofa, and the two toddlers settled on either side of him. He opened the storybook, but as he looked at his daughters and at the lively house around them, the smiling photos on the walls, he knew one thing for sure. He didn't need fairy tales. He was living his own happily ever after. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.